Shari'a standard number 8, this is related to Murabaha to purchase orders. Already we have discussed how to do the accounting for this, and I'm going to discuss the Shari'a standards. We'll start our discussion about scope of the standard, procedure prior to the contract of Murabaha, and acquisition of title to and possession of the asset by the institution or to its agent. We can conclude a Murabaha contract. We can check the guarantees and treatment of Murabaha receivables, and in the last we will discuss the issuance date. Let's start our discussion with the scope of the standard. The standard is applicable on Murabaha to the PO purchase order transaction and its various stages. This is related to guarantees before concluding Murabaha deal, such as promise, security deposit, and issues relating to guarantees for the recovery of debt created through Murabaha transaction. Keep in mind that this standard is not applicable to deferred payment sales because there is another standard for it. Let's start our discussion. What is the procedure prior to the contract of Murabaha? First of all, the customer expectation on his wish to acquire an item through the institution is required. A customer will show intention to the institution that this is what he wants to do. It is permissible for an institute to purchase the item only in response to customer wish and application, as long as the practice is compatible with Shari'a's precepts of the contract of sales. With due consideration, it is permissible for customer to request the institution to purchase the item for a particular source of supply. Customer wish to acquire the item does not constitute a promise or commitment except when it has been expressed in due form. Customer may retain statement of prices from the supplier, which they are addressed to the customer by name or with no reference to any named customer. In terms of position of the institute in respect to an application of customer for Murabaha to purchase order, there is acceptable by a customer of an offer from a supplier that is either addressed to him personally or to has no addressee, then it is not permissible for an institute to carry out Murabaha to purchase order. It is also essential to exclude any prior contractual relationships between the customer who is purchase order and the original supplier of the item ordered. Same way, institution must ensure that the party from whom the item is bought is a third party and it's not the customer or it's not an agent. This is really very important. It is permitted for institution to purchase the item from a party who has a blood relationship or a marital status, like marital relationship with the customer who is the purchase orderer, and then to sell to the item to the customer on deferred payments. It is not permitted for an institution and the customer to agree to form a musharaka in a project on a specific deal together with the promise from one of them to buy the other musharaka participation by means of Murabaha on either spot or deferred payment terms. Moreover, it is not permitted to carry out a Murabaha on deferred payment term when the asset involved is gold, silver or the currencies. Let's talk about the promise from the customer. What a customer can promise and what he cannot. It is not permissible that the document of promise to buy signed by the customer should include a bilateral promise which is binding on both parties, the institution and the customer. Customer promise to purchase and related contractual frameworks are not integral to Murabaha transaction but are intended to provide assurance that the customer will complete the transaction. In case a bilateral promise between the customer and the institution is done, it is permissible only if there is an option to cancel the promise, which may be exercised either by both parties. Moreover, it is also permissible for an institution and the customer after the latter has given a promise, but before the execution of the Murabaha, to agree to revise the term of the promises. It is permissible for any institution to purchase the item from a supplier on a sale or return basis. Let's talk about commissioning and the expenses related to these kind of transactions. It is not permissible for an institute to make money out of it to receive a commitment fee from the customer. It's not permissible for the institution to receive a fee for providing a credit facility, and the expense of preparing the documents of the contract between the institution and the customer are to be divided between both parties as beneficiaries. If the Murabaha to purchase order is carried out by the means of syndicated financing, the institution which acts as an arranger of syndicate is entitled to claim an arrangement fee to be paid by the participants in the syndicate, so they can divide amongst themselves. Let's talk about guarantee related to commencement of the transaction. It is permissible for an institution to obtain from a customer the purchase order a guarantee regarding the goods performance by the supplier on his contractual obligations towards the institutions in his personal capacity, and not in his capacity as a purchase orderer or in his capacity as an agent of the institution. It is not permitted to impose on customer who is the purchase orderer a guarantee regarding hazards that may affect the items, such as damage, destruction during a period of shipment or storage. It is also not. It is permissible. For the institution in case of binding promises by the customer to take a sum of money as a security deposit. This has to be paid by the customer on the request. In case customer breach of his binding promises, the institution is not permitted to retain his security deposit, and institution's rights are limited to deduct the amount of actual damage incurred as a result of the breach. Namely, we can say the difference between the cost of item to the institution and its selling price to the third party. Actual damages to the institution may not include the loss of markup in the Murabaha transaction, and we will treat it as an opportunity loss. Opportunity loss is like there are two words: opportunity gain and losses. This is economic cost, and we cannot quantify in terms of monetary value. When the customer has fulfilled his promise and executed the contract of Murabaha to the purchase orderer, the institution must refund his security deposit to the customer. It is logical and it is his right that they should own. It is permissible for the institution to take earnest money after concluding the Murabaha sales with the customer. It may not be done during the contractual state at which the customer has given his promise to purchase. Let's talk about acquisition of title to and the possession of the asset by the institution or its agent. First of all, acquisition of an asset or a good by the institution prior to its sale by means of Murabaha to the purchase orderer. In terms of acquisition of the asset, institution is prohibited from selling any item in Murabaha transaction before having acquired the items.